We are live. Hi guys. So yes, my name is Velda Kiara. I'm the She Code Africa Nairobi lead, and today we're going to have a meetup on Angular, that is web development using Angular. Our speaker today is going to be Cyrus Kichuki. So he's a demonstrated software engineer with profession in JavaScript, Ruby, Dart, and Python. He's also a speaker, a problem solver, leader, team player, and he's also not afraid to get his hands dirty. He runs a software engineering consulting firm called 0101 Solutions. Yeah, that's pretty nice. So yeah, welcome Cyrus to this meeting. So he's going to take over the session, and then we're going to have a brief Q&A after the last 30 minutes. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to post them on the chat. And yes, just reach out to us if you have anything else to add. Yeah. Welcome, Cyrus.
Okay, thank you so much, Velda. So as Velda said, my name is Cyrus, and today I'm going to be taking you guys through the NG webinar series, going to be the Angular web series. And I think I can share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about Angular and all things Angular. So we're going to be discussing about everything to do with the Angular architecture. Maybe let me give you guys a little bit background about me. So I'm also a student. I'm currently a student at St. Paul's University, and I'm a better Microsoft Learn student ambassador. So being a student ambassador, we get to have leverage to cool stuff. As you can see, the stickers behind to help us so we can like spread out information. So we have cool platforms like Microsoft Learn, access to my LinkedIn Learning, and I'd advise you to apply for the next cohort, which is taken every quarter. So you'll be on the lookout. And without much further ado, I'll take you guys through an Angular introduction. Our presentation is going to be divided into two parts. So we are going to have a bit of presentation to get some groundwork with Angular. Then we're going to be switching from presentation to code, whereby I'm going to teach you guys how to create a simple blog application. If time allows, we're going to put in all the cool stuff that I'll teach you. And yeah, if possible, Velda will give me an opportunity to come back again and finish what I had planned for today. So without much further ado, let me just begin the presentation. So yeah, just a minute. Yeah, I think let's begin. Okay, just a minute. My phone is behaving, my laptop is behaving. I'm presenting twice. Yeah, let's go. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna be talking about all things Angular. Let's just wait for that to load. Yeah. And let's go. So we're going to have some prerequisites for our application. So some JavaScript knowledge is assumed, although our application is going to be using TypeScript because Angular is TypeScript based. However, I'm going to be discussing that as we go on. So our second prerequisite is some TypeScript knowledge is assumed. However, if you come from a Java world or a strongly typed language like Dart, so you're sort of safe, and is assumed for all developers in the CS field. So some CS knowledge is assumed. Things like OP, functions, all those are assumed for the application. And our tools of craft are going to be VS Code. I hope you have VS Code installed, Node.js installed, and if possible, a pen, paper, and notebook to just jot down some few notes. Okay, where did that come from? Okay, where is Angular? So Angular is an application design framework and development platform for creating efficient and sophisticated single page applications. So what does this mean? So you're able to create applications that are single pages. Okay, that's I didn't really help you, but yeah, that's essentially the point. You are able to create applications that function individually in pages. For example, something like Facebook can be created instead of constantly building new pages. You're able to create like maybe 3 pages and then feed them with components that will always change now when you change from one page to another. So making development sort of better and now making it easier to scale up. So it is TypeScript based. It is an open source JavaScript framework that makes it easy to build applications on the web. Angular solves application development challenges by combining declarative templates, dependency injection, end-to-end tooling, and so much more. So when we create our application, when we craft our application with the command line, I'm going to show you some of the, I think, superpowers that Angular is able to have. However, we're not going to be discussing about tooling. That's a topic for another day, and testing. So that's, I hope I get another opportunity. So Angular empowers developers to build applications that live on the web, mobile, and desktop. And there is sort of some confusion between Angular and React. Angular is a framework. React is a library. So you can use React inside Angular. So you can create your React application and it can be used within Angular because Angular is a framework. So what is a framework? A framework is a sort of library that offers features that allow you to implement complex requirements of modern applications, such as data binding, routing, and animations. Although animations is done by React and by even Vue, it's still Angular gives you that sort of high level overview for how to do it. So the framework is the brainchild of Google engineers, and I'd say thank you to those guys, man. They helped my development journey. So there's the Angular architecture. So the Angular is a platform framework for building single page client applications using HTML and TypeScript. As we're going to see what our component entails, the architecture of an Angular application relies on certain fundamental concepts. These are the basic blocks of building the Angular framework, and Angular components are organized into ng modules. So they're like Angular modules. So they just give it a short word, ng modules. So ng modules, they collect related code into functional sets. An Angular app is defined by a set of ng modules, and an app always has at least a root module that enables bootstrapping and typically has many more features, has many more feature modules. So you will find, apart from when we open our app module directory, you're able to see, maybe let me say, a high overview of what an Angular application entails. So you can have an Angular application feeding an Angular application, or an Angular application being the child of another Angular application, and you can create those sort of dependencies, and it's easy to integrate all applications. So the Angular CLI is what we use primarily for development. The Angular CLI is a command line interface that you use to initialize, develop, scaffold, and maintain Angular applications directly from the command shell. I forgot to add even build. It is installed using the npm package manager. So you remember I said we need Node. So the Node package manager is because Angular is a JavaScript framework. So we can install it with the Node package manager. And we install the Angular client with this command globally. And it's a fundamental part of building components, directives, and pipes, as we will see later in the course as we get our hands dirty. So the tool is invoked on the command line through ng executable. So ng executable is like a command to invoke the application, and you are able to pass in parameters, or let me say arguments, such as generate and others as we continue to move in our presentation. Okay, so before we continue, hold up, I need us to review some necessary object-oriented programming concepts. So we need to know what a decorator is. Decorators, as we know from OOP, are functions that modify JavaScript classes or classes in general. Now, in our case, JavaScript classes. Angular defines several decorators that attach specific kind of metadata to classes. so that the system knows what those classes mean and how they should work, e.g. the ng module decorator. We also have the component decorator for exporting the whole application's components, the CSS and the HTML outside of the application. So I just want you guys to keep this in mind as we move on. So what is an ng module? So an ng module is defined by a class decorated with the @ng module. So the @ng module decorator is a function that takes a single metadata object whose properties describe the module. Now, the ng module has 4 important properties. I think there are 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. One is declarations. So all components, directives, pipes, and declarations that belong to the ng module need to be put there. I'm going to show you how we're going to do this. We have an exports. Now, the subset of declarations that should be visible and usable in a component templates of other ng modules. Like I said, we can create an Angular application that feeds another Angular application. So you need to export the exports parameter in the ng modules function is used to export the application to for use in other templates or components. And we have providers, which are the creators of services, and we won't focus too much on providers and Bootstrap. Thinking about this is a beginner's level, but we will focus on imports. Imports are other modules whose exported classes are needed by component templates declared in this ng module. Now, if this is the root ng module, we're going to be needing modules like HTTP client modules, the forms module, the browser module, and all these are going to be imported through the imports in our ng module file, in our app module file. We're going to see this as we move on. So Angular ng modules differ from complement JavaScript ES 2015 modules. So an ng module declares a compilation context for a set of components that is dedicated to an application domain, a workflow, or a closely related set of capabilities. This is from the Angular documentation. So an Angular module can associate its components with related code, such as services, to form functional units in a way it's aware of its surrounding. So as you will come to see, when you create a component per se in an application, you can be able to access it everywhere within the application. So Angular knows how data flows through its application, and you do not need to configure how you're going to do that, for example, like with state management or something. This is automatically done for you with Angular. And when you create a module through the command line, either it's a directive, a pipe, a component, it's able to be added in the ng module and able to be accessed anywhere within the application. So like JavaScript modules, we can import functionality from other modules, so we can destructure our modules and only pull in what we need. And moving forward, our second thing we're going to talk about is components. So every Angular application has at least one component, the root component, which connects a component hierarchy within the page, document, object model, the DOM. And each component defines a class that contains application data and logic that is associated with a HTML template that defines a view to be displayed in a target environment. For example, if we have an online store, you can have a component that deals with the searching, and it will have its own HTML, its own CSS and styling, and its own logic for searching. And you can use that. That in itself is a component that can be used in another application. For example, now you can inject it, and it can be used in the DOM. So we don't use no virtual DOM, where we can use it in the DOM, and you can be able to access your application in that manner. So the component decorator identifies the class immediately below it as a component and provides the template and related component specific metadata, such as HTML and CSS files, as we'll come to see. So let me just give you a view of how our application will look like. So here we have our in our first diagram, ng module A, we have our application has a root component. So an A1 we can assume to be our CSS, and A2 can be our HTML, and root component A is our logic. So you can see all our root component has access to all the components in our application, the HTML and the CSS file, and it is able to export them into the application. And even as our application grows, we have root component B. So root component B can have another root component from another application, and another root component from another application, and another root component that is needed to generate the view for that application. So Angular makes it really easy to scale because you can really just combine your application and export your application as a module to be used in the other application. Okay, moving on. Oh, forgot about that. So this is how we create components in Angular. So we use the ngGC and then the component name argument, or the ng generate is supposed to be component, not service, component name. And this is supposed to be what is used in our application, in our command line interface when we want to generate new components for our application. We're going to see why this is advantageous. Okay, templates. So what is a template? So we can see from the diagram below, we have a root component and we have a root template, and the root template has other templates, which it has children templates, and it has the children templates. One of them has grandchildren templates. So what are templates? Template combines HTML with Angular markup that can modify HTML elements before they're displayed. So you're able to, you're able to combine HTML with Angular logic, and you're able to process that before it's rendered to the user. So template directives provide logic, program logic, and binding markup that connects your application data and the DOM. A components view is defined with its companions template. So a template basically contains the directive, the program logic, the markup, the HTML, and the CSS, and the logic, the TypeScript file to render now the whole template. A template is therefore a form of HTML that tells Angular how to render a page. So let's continue. I'm going to be sharing the link to the presentation so that you can read more if you need to verse yourself more with Angular. So you have data binding. This is another key property to consider if you're going to be working with Angular. So data binding, I think I had something to say. So without a framework, you would be responsible for pushing data values into the HTML controls and turning user responses into actions and value updates. And writing such push and pull logic by hand is just tedious. So I think we have people who have, maybe you guys have worked with Axios and Ajax, and it's so very painful to work on how you're going to get every request and bring it back. But Angular is just defining it with simple data binding, as you're going to see. So we can see writing such push and pull logic by hand is tedious, error prone, and a nightmare to read. Yeah, I almost can't read the code the next day, as an experienced front-end JavaScript programmer can attest. So a template combines HTML with Angular markup that can modify HTML elements before they're displayed. We already said that. Template directives provide program logic and binding, which connects the application to the DOM. We already said that. Angular supports two-way data binding. Now this is where it gets hot. Two-way data binding means that you can display your you can get data from the backend and bring it to the front end. At the same time, get data from the front end and bring it to the backend simultaneously. So how does Angular enable two-way data binding? It's a mechanism for coordinating the parts of a template with the parts of a component. Adding binding markup to the template HTML to tell Angular how to connect both sides. So we have two ways we can use. So Angular uses two-way data binding. So the first one is event binding. So event binding lets your app respond to user input in the target environment by updating your application data. So for example, if it's a form, for example, you want to subscribe, so it will take the form and then detect the event and then bring back the application. Now, we can do that within a small component, not with the whole application, as we'll come to see as we move forward. We also have property binding. This lets you interpolate values that are computed from your application data into the HTML. For example, if you have data to be rendered from somewhere and you need it in the front end, data binding provides a way to do this efficiently. Now you can do property binding, where you get values computed from your application into the HTML. We're going to see that as we create our small blog application. So two-way data binding, used mainly in template-driven forms, combines property and event binding in a single notation. This means in two-way binding, a data property value flows into the input box from the component, as with property binding. The user's changes also flow back to the component, resetting the property to the latest value, as with event binding. So we're able to do all of them simultaneously. And I think it's getting too wordy. I'm going to explain it later. The fifth, let's say, component you would need to consider is services. So for data or logic that isn't associated with a specific view that you want to share across components, you create a service class. Now, as you can see from the image, we have a component and we have a constructor which takes in a service, and then the service is injected into a component and works its magic, and then when it's done, it stops. So service is a broad category encompassing any value, function, or feature that an app needs. A service is typically a class with a narrow, well-defined purpose. It should do something specific and do it well. That's what I always say. So don't just create services that are vague. You need to have a service that does something and does it well. So for example, if you have an HTTP application, you would have a service that talks to the API, and you would have a service that checks the response gotten from the HTTP or validates the token, something. So you can have as many services as you want in your application. And what they do is really just simplify application logic. And Angular distinguishes components from services to increase modularity and reusability. So I think this is amazing. It sounds like a lot of English, but once we go and start developing our applications, you're going to see how this is advantageous. So by distinguishing components to services, you can create your own component service, then inject your service whenever the component calls the service, and it works its magic and then leaves. I use magic a lot. So ideally, a component's job is to enable the user's experience, nothing more. A component should present properties and methods for data binding, sort of like a class. In order to mediate between the view rendered by the template and the application logic, which often includes some notion of a model, let's move forward and see. I think we cut that part. So we use a service. That's where I was headed. And this is how we create services in Angular. So we use okay, I don't know where that came from. We use the ng-generate service name. And now here is where you would put your service. And this is where now we would put the service name. So how our services would say, so a component can delegate tasks to services, such as fetching data from the server, validating user input, logging. By defining such processing tasks in an injectable service class, you make those tasks available to any component within your application. I think that's well defined. I don't want to overdo it. So Angular doesn't enforce these principles, but it does help you to follow these principles by making it easy to factor your application logic into your services and make those services available to components through dependency injection. Now, this is where that OOP logic comes in. So from the diagram we have here, this is a demonstration of dependency injection. What is dependency injection? It lets you keep your component classes lean and efficient. So this means they don't fetch data from the server or validate user input or log directly to the console. It's just done by a service and it's just happening in the background. So if you come from a Ruby world, this is sort of like helpers, whereby these are just functions, or middleware if you come from a Node.js that is just running and it's decoupled from your application controller or MVC. Similar, it's just the same thing in Angular. And here I'm giving a bit of a more explanation in on what dependency injection is. Yeah, okay, my computer is behaving. So dependency injection, to computer. Let's define dependency injection. So according to Wikipedia, dependency injection is a technique whereby one object supplies the dependencies of another object. Okay. It's a technique where one object supplies the dependencies of another object. Now, a dependency is an object that can be used as a service, and an injection is passing of the dependency to a dependent object. For example, you have a social media application and a user schema. The schema for the user in the database will be name, date, maybe created that, updated that, password, and you would have maybe messages. Now, a messages schema would be injected into the user schema because messages need to have a schema of their own. So a message should have um, the ID. If not, of course, they'll have IDs. The message should have an ID. The message should have the message string, the user ID where it's from, and the user ID where it's going to, and the time it was sent, and the time it was seen, whether it was seen like receipts in WhatsApp, and so much more. So that's a simple example of dependency injection, whereby you inject an object, now a service, into another object, now the client. Dependency injection lets you keep component classes lean and efficient. They don't, yeah, we've already said that. DI is wired into the Angular framework and used everywhere to provide new components with services. That is, you can inject a service into a component, giving the component access to that service class. And it's defined using the injectable decorator to provide metadata that allows Angular to inject it into a component as a dependency. So I think that's more tangible. We're going to see what this means when we move into our application. Here, I'm just giving a brief explanation of dependency injection, whereby I'm saying some components of dependency injection in Angular include injector, the main mechanism. It creates an application-wide injector for you during the bootstrap process, and you don't have to create injectors. Now, a provider is an object that tells the injector how to obtain a certain, or how to obtain or create a dependency. For any dependency you need in your app, you must register a provider with the app's injector so that the injector can use the provider to create a new instance. I hope I didn't confuse you with that, but we're going to see that as we build the application. Here, I'm just giving more information about dependency injection. Here we have our example from the docs, whereby the Angular documentation does a good job of creating a small superhero application. And here we have an injector which has so many services. So we have service A, service B, service C, service D. Service B is called hero service. And in the component, we can inject an instance of hero service and we can initialize it and call the methods that are in the hero service to our application. Now, our last, I think, if not least, thing we need to consider in Angular, if not component of Angular we need to consider, is the directives. So Angular templates, like I've said, are dynamic. When Angular renders them, it transforms the DOM according to the instructions given by the directives. So a directive is a class with a directive decorator. I'll show you what this means. So there's a way you initialize, you tell Angular that this is a directive, this is an injectable, this is a service, this is a component using the component decorator. And a component is technically a directive. However, components are so distinctive and central to Angular that Angular defines the component which extends the directive decorator with template-oriented features. Now, what that statement means is that a component is a directive, but now a component is focused on the template or the UI features, not necessarily with the logic. Now, a directive is also a component, but it's focused on the logic, not the UI. So things like, should I say, let me just wait. We're going to discuss it in our application. I'm going to show you what our application entails. So in addition to components, there are two other kinds of directives, structural and attributes. So this one is a bit high level, but Angular has defined a number of directives of both kinds. You can define your own using the directive decorator, and you can just, it's as simple as just adding the directive decorator to your class, and you just begin creating directives for your application. I'm going to show you some of the examples that we have. Here we just talk about directives a little more in detail. Now, if you want to know what a directive entails, here we have the banana boat, the ng model. This is essentially what this function does, the input. This is an input HTML tag with an invalid tag here. If you come from HTML, it's called an ng model. So this is called a banana boat. So here what we're doing is we're saying the input should match this input should be taken and should match the username in the logic. Now in the template. No, in the logic. Now in the template file within our component. I'm going to show you how all this is done and declared. Our last but not least is a class. A class is now this is a pipe. A class with the pipe decorator defines the function that transforms input values to output values. For example, if you want to control currency, convert. If you want to convert currency from Kenya shilling to maybe Tanzanian shillings, you don't need to import, I don't know, Forex API. No, you just translate it to the pipe. In fact, we have inbuilt pipes that are used for that kind of function. So you can see here we have an example how you would use a pipe in Angular. Is you would use these curly braces to instantiate the pipe. So this is how we inject data inside of Angular. I wasn't done yet. So this is how we inject data inside of Angular, and this is how we create our, okay. Just with that. So to specify a value transformation in a HTML template, So to specify a value transformation in a HTML template, use the pipe or operator. So we all know this, the or operator, the slash. That's how we declare. Okay, this timing is, I think I'm going past my time. Yeah, we're almost done with the presentation. And you can chain pipes, sending the output of one pipe function transformed by another pipe, transformed by another, and so on. And so a pipe can also take arguments that control how it performs its transformation. So I'll show you guys how to create a pipe that takes in inputs and gives out outputs, takes in something like an array and gives out like a string. And let's move forward. Our last topic is routing. So in a single page application, you change what the user sees by showing or hiding portions of the display that correspond to particular components. Rather than going out to the server and get a new page, as users perform application tasks, they need to move between different views that you have defined. Now, the Angular Router ng module provides a service that lets you define navigation path among different application states and view hierarchies in your application. So to handle the navigation from one view to the next, use the Angular Router. And the router enables navigation by interpreting a browser URL. So that browser URL is used to detect where you are in the application and what pages you should render and whether or not you're authenticated to view the page. And it takes a whole lot of arguments. Your front end can be equally as good as your back end. So you have double type or should I say validation? Yeah. And last but not least, I'm going to show you guys all these things as we get to create our application. Yeah, so this is how an Angular application should look according to the documentation. So here we're saying we have metadata. It's like, should I maybe say the state? So we have our template here. Our template is what is seed by us. So we can say this is a HTML templates. And a template can be rendered by a directive, which has its own metadata that can be used to render a template within the view. And we can bind our component to our view through event and property binding. This is the two-way data binding that I was talking about. Now, if an event happens here, it's rendered by the component and then it's taken back to the template. Now, injectors are used to inject services. Dependency injection is used to inject services into our component to help render our template. Now, for example, if there's a user who signed up, you need a service to validate whether the user is in the database or not, and then return something that is going to be used by the component that is going to render now, or maybe forward you to the next component that is going to render that page. So this is how an Angular application should look. We have even some modules here that we can import. And yeah, I think we're going to get coding. Yeah. So some of the objectives you've gotten to understand over this session is through this presentation is an Angular architecture. So now you understand the Angular architecture and an Angular application ecosystem. Like I said, I'm going to be sharing this presentation so you can have some of the notes and understand maybe what if you weren't able to understand. And okay, we aren't done with our not yet Q&A session. Q&A session is actually last. Series expectations, yeah. I think let's get coding. Hii presentation imeanza kunisumbua. Okay, so I think we're going to install ng npm. Yeah, oh, thank God. Let me just bring down the application that I want to create for you guys. So a while back, I had proposed to redo a blog for a certain company, and I was told I can use Angular. So I decided to use, actually, I purposely decided to use Angular because it just looked too easy to just do it with Angular for their use case. And let me show you the proposal that I was able to pitch. Just a minute. Let me just close this. Yeah, let me just close this. This. Can also just minimize this. Stop this. I was running some scripts I was working, so some things I have to finish off. I had called Velda to ask if the meeting was still on because I couldn't remember or I couldn't find for the life of me the link. So I was just working, waiting for the link, but the link was already sent. So GitHub. So this is a demo that I want you guys to see before we get our hands dirty. We're going to be using GitHub to share code. So if you have a GitHub account, I think you're going to be better placed to access the code. I'm going to be sharing the link to the GitHub repository. And
yeah, please share it here at the comment section and then I'll share it to the other groups.
Okay. Just a minute. Yeah. Let me just post it. Okay. So first thing you do after installing that. Okay, I have so many. Oh, okay. Chrome. First thing you do after cloning that. So we're going to clone the repository. So first I'm going to navigate to my desktop and it's in there. Also, we have a she code folder. No. Let's just create a new folder. mkdir she code Africa KE. She code Africa KE. And then we can clone our repository in here. Then we can navigate into the folder. cd bonga blog pro. I hope you can see the font. It's not too small. When I bring it back up, it's going to be too tiny. Okay, now we're inside the application and we can see, let's just navigate into our application. I'm going to be using VS Code. Let me just minimize this. And let me just clear this. And yeah, here's VS Code. So this is what an Angular application looks like. This is the end-to-end tooling that we were talking about. This is where you would, I would say, configure your tests. This is the build application. Now, whenever you run a build, this is what happens when you build your application. This is the source, and this is where all your application logic is going to be. So inside here, we have 3 folders.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you
Yeah.
like expand your
Oh,
editor
yeah.
to be a little bit bigger so that we can see? Because it's kind of really hard to see.
To
it.
see, yeah. I use
Yeah.
extra small font. Okay, I think that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's
Yeah,
fine.
okay. Yeah, so like I was saying, this is the whole application logic. So don't worry about these things. You probably won't even open them like in ever. So this TS-lint helps how you can configure or compile your TypeScript. This spec is like for testing and all this other neat stuff. The README is the where you write all the logic. And here we can see we have the project generated by Angular CLI, and we have how to bring up our development server, how to generate components, how to build our application, how to run unit tests, and how to run end-to-end tests to make sure our whole application is like unit tests integrating. And so in our source file, we have 3 folders. We have our app folder, our assets folder where our assets will be sitting, and we have our environments. Now, this is where we configure environments for our application, whether it's going to be production or development. You probably even never will open this. You'll only open this one when you're setting the production URL. And in the environments, now in the source folder, we have our index.html. So this is the main application root.
Interrupt
Yeah.
you a little bit.
Yeah.
So the link you have shared is returning a 404. So I don't know if it's private or can you make it public?
Yeah, probably. Let me just sort that out. Yeah, it's private. I can see
Yeah.
that. Sorry. Let me just fix this and then we can continue. Yeah, I think now it should be ready.
Let me just retry. Yeah, it's working.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to the code and yeah. Okay, so this is the HTML file. This is where all your application is going to sit. This is what runs when you run ng-sub. When an Angular application runs, this is what is running. I mean, I know it looks sort of minimalistic, yeah, but this is where all the application logic goes in. Now, when your application is rendered, it will go into the app root, and the app root now, as we're going to go and see, is going to be here. Now, the main app itself is going to be maybe, let's say here in the app module. And in the app module, let me just maximize this. Inside our app module, we have all this beautiful stuff, all these Angular modules that we are importing for our application to run. Here we have the ng module, and you can see I have so many errors because all these things are not configured properly. Let's just do a quick npm I so we can make VS Code stop screaming. So this will install all our application dependencies. So after cloning and like going into the file directory, Make sure you click npm I so that all the node modules are installed. And if you can just look at our application, some files are going to appear here called node modules. And essentially, those are what are needed to make our application run. I would say Angular is a heavy application. It's not heavy, but take some time to compile and run. And so just some few minutes. I hope my internet is stable. Meanwhile, let's continue. So this is the ng module decorator that we were talking about. The ng module decorator takes in declarations. Now, these are application declarations. Anything that you have initialized in your application as a component, a directive, a pipe, or a service is instantiated here. Oh, wow. So I think we were able to successfully... Okay, that's not where I wanted to go. We were able to successfully complete our installation. We don't have our node modules folder yet, but I think it's on the way anyway. So here is the declaration, whereby the declaration is where all our modules are declared. Our imports is where we declare all our global imports that we want in our application. Now, Angular has modules. So like we were saying here, we can import modules from Angular core. So you can see here we're importing from Angular core platform browser. Here we're also importing the ng module from the Angular core. We're even importing the HTTP function. And we also have imports. Now, this is what I've already said, imports. Providers. Now, we won't need to maybe go too much into our application. But I have essentially described what providers and Bootstrap really are. And the Bootstrap means that this is what you want to be rendered like as our whole application. So it's going to take the app component. And I think if we give it a run, oh, not yet. Here we have our node modules. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, okay. Let's just fix some of these issues. And now in our routing application, or now let me just show you guys what a component looks like: a pipe, a service, and a directive. Now, this is what a service is. So we said a service needs to be a well-defined class. Yeah. So here we have seen we instantiate a service with the injectable class. So you can see here it's a decorator that marks a class as available to be provided and injected as a dependency. Marking a class with injectable ensures that the compiler will generate the necessary metadata, all that's good stuff that we talked about in the session. And so here now we can export our class request service, which takes in the HTTP client instance. So this is a perfect example of dependency injection. So we are injecting the client instance from the Angular module. You can see this is a service is available as an injectable class. So this is an injector, and then this is the client. So now what do we want to do with this HTTP client? So we want to create a function called public make requests, which takes the URL and returns a promise. So a promise is like in TypeScript or in JavaScript is like, if you give me something, I promise I'll give you this. So we sort of do some exchange. And if you give me something that is maybe not HTTP client instance, I cannot give you what I'm supposed to return here. And now when we create the function, so what we do is we return this .http.get. So this is a .get is a get function, like get route, get for getting, get, what are they called? Velda, what are those get, post, put, patch, HTTP methods? Yeah, thank you. They are HTTP methods and they can be used within our application. And so here what we do is we get the URL and then we console log the value. And then if there's an error, we catch the error. So this is a service. You can see we have nothing else that needs to be here that is not here. And this is a directive. So our directive is going to be a magnifying directive. So we're going to create something that magnifies. And what this does is it has a private magnify function that is instantiated through the element reference, which element reference is a module that is imported in from the Angular core, from the Angular core module. And element ref gets us element references within our application, as you're going to see. A pipe, what is a pipe? Now, a pipe is something that takes a value and transforms the input and now gives another value. Now here what we're doing is we have the transform. So what transform does, it takes an array and returns an order. By putting the question mark, we say this is optional. So it can either return an order or not. And it should return an array. So the application should return an array of strings. So here what we do is we sort our array and we check if the order is descending, we reverse the whole array. And okay, I think now we can start our application. Yeah, npm audit fix. We have moderate problems with our application. Anyway, we're going to deal with that later because this is something I worked on in December. So I knew there are some upgrades. But I have done something else that I'm going to share the code on GitHub. If that fails, you're going to find another one. It's going to be called SheCode, and I'm going to share it with Velda. So when you do ng, so we already said ng is the Angular application. So after running npm install Angular client, so yeah, we can see where the problem is. I have version 11.24 and my local version for the application is version 10. So yeah, that needs to be upgraded. So we can see some of the functions we have available for us. I hope this is visible. So some of the available commands we have are add, analytics, build, deploy, config, doc, end-to-end, generate, which you're going to use a lot, run, and serve. And so without much further ado, let's just run this ng serve. And serve can take in parameters, and we can be able to see what our ng serve, I think it's -- help. So we're able to see so we're able to see what our application is, what the ng serve takes as arguments. So we can be able to see the list of hosts that are allowed to access the dev server by passing in the allowed hosts. We can use the AOT to build ahead of time. We can use the host to listen for requests. We can use the port to pass the port that we want to listen to. We can use this one I'm looking for here. Where is it? Open. Yeah, open -o. So when you open, it returns the URL in the default browser. So for example, now if we were to say ng serve -o or --open, our application will start building, and after it builds, it will be able to generate the modules that are going to be rendered, because our browsers render JavaScript, not TypeScript. So when you are able to run this, it is able to compile all applications to JavaScript so that it can be rendered by the browser, and it is able to do some neat stuff like refresh. So we're able to see that. Yeah. So you can see that our Angular is compiling to ES 2015. So the normal JavaScript that we know, ECMAScript 2015. And okay, this is going to take a while. And meanwhile, I think we can start scaffolding our application, so we can know what our application is going to be like. I'm just going to show you guys how to create a few commands. I have detailed commits that are going to describe each and every step that I used in building the application, so you're able to see how far I was able to go, what I did, how I averted back, how I changed my methods, and all that stuff. So you can see here Angular is building. Well, I could say it takes a lot of time, but with the advantages you get, I don't think time compiling should be an issue, because it's actually relatively very fast. So we can go into the CD desktop, and then we go to she code Africa KE folder, and what's in there. So we have the Bonga blog proposal, so we can create, here is the application. Yeah, so this is the application that we're going to build. Just a simple blog application, and it's going to have a small API here, a button to call our API, and I think it's supposed to be logging to our console. So when you click call our API, where is our console? Yeah, so we are able to get something from the Star Wars API. Oh yeah, I remember. So we are able to get characters from Star Wars. We are able to get basically from the Swappy dev, Star Wars API dev, API films. So we are able to get films like Coruscant, the rotation. I think we're able to get the names of the planets in the film. And so this is what is being displayed here. So this is just a demonstration to show that our application can make HTTP requests, and they can be called. You remember the service is what's calling, but our button is what's bringing the. And when we click again, we get a different. Yeah, so we can see from the movie Coruscant, we have different. What is different here? Terrain, cityscape, surface, water. So we have residents, we have films. Oh, I can't remember what we were getting, but I think we were working with the films API, because I can see here the request we're getting is to films. And so when you go to other routes, now this is where I love Angular 4. We're able to go to other routes without our page refreshing. So if you can just look at our page, it's not refreshing, and we're just moving from component to component to component and back and back. And we're even able to maybe subscribe to our blog, Cyrus at 0101, and password is 123456. And when we register, apologies, my application is not user responsive. It's just essentially to show us the advantages that we can get with Angular, but you can make this mobile responsive if you feel like this code is completely open source. And here we have a pipe. So our pipe is what orders our application. So even in our password, we can see here that our email is not defined. I don't know what that is, but here we are able to see that our password is being logged successfully. Now we're able to use the ng model banana bot. This is how you're able to see or to relate data from the front end to the back end. We're also using event data binding, event and property binding, whereby we are getting data from the front end, rendering it in the back end, and displaying a user. So we have property and event binding simultaneously. And yeah, I think let's just go get started. So I think we can close this. So let's mkdir new blog, cd new blog. And how we would create our application is ng new. And then we want to skip tests so that our application can generate faster. So like I said, these are some of the parameters you can be able to check using the ng help, this -- help. It can help you to see, okay, I forgot to skip tests. Meanwhile, now our application is divided into, I would say, two parts. So first of all, we have our main application template or component, and we have our app module and app routing module. Now you can see these ones are highlighted in green because these are essential to our application. Now, how do we configure routes in our application? So this is our routing module, and we said ng module is like our component, like decorator. So it can be used. A template can use exported declarables from any imported modules, including those modules that are imported indirectly and re-exported. So for example, module A imports module B and also exports it, which makes the declarable from module B available wherever module A is imported. I hope you can see all that logic and how it relates. So we are able to import our router for routes. This is some complicated let's say TypeScript. But what essentially they're doing is they're taking the router module, and for the route path, you can see here, creates and configures a module with all the router providers and directives, and optionally sets an application listener to perform initial navigation. So whenever you render your application first and your server wakes up, and you maybe you're on the 404 page, it's going to redirect you back to the homepage if you configure. Now, this is what our application route should look like. So what does a route do? A route takes in a path, the path now, which should be now the path that you want to take, the component, now the component that you want, which is imported. So we can see we have a nice way of importing modules from a component. So our home component could have 1,000 modules, but we only want the home component, and we want the path to match fully. So we don't want someone who's maybe writing artificial to get matched to the same path as artificial intelligence. That's why we use path match full to match the whole name to the respective path. And so here we have some other routes. Most notably is this secret route. And the secret route takes in, it's a route that has the component itself takes in a key or a parameter and returns in the secret page together with the parameter. So yeah. And with that, I think our application has finished. Oh, okay. So yes. Do you want to set up a new workspace? Yes. Do you want to yes. CSS? Yes. So this is simple process you do when you create an Angular application. And while that builds, so this is our main Angular application, I would say, what is rendered. So if you look at our app module, now this is the brainchild of our application. So we can see here that in the Bootstrap class, we're exporting the app component. And this is what we want bootstrapped. So this is what we want rendered as our main application. So this is our main application entry point. And this is the logic that holds our main application entry point. So here we have a class. So it's called app component. And you can see this is what we import. Here, you can see app component here. This is what we import. And what it does is, yeah. So we'll have to have a constructor in our class to instantiate our class and our variables. And I have some application here with comments. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so I was working on this application, adding some comments before we started the meeting. So let me just switch over to here. So this is our subject. We still have a long way to go. We're working on our subject. And this is our main application module. And what our application is, so this is the main logic behind the app component. The class implements the onInit lifecycle hook. So here we are exporting our class, which implements the onInit function. So what is onInit? It's a lifecycle hook that is called after Angular has initialized all data-bound properties of a directive, and it's defined on ng-onInit to handle additional initialization tasks. So if we have, let me just open our brackets. So during our application construction, we want to log parameters are added. So this is essentially where you would add variables or parameters that our class needs in order to run. And we just passed in a console log. Now, this is going to be rendered every time our application is rendered. Every time the component is rendered, the constructor function is going to be called and it's going to render the log. Our ng-onInit, when our application is initialized, a callback method after default changeover detector has checked the directives data-bound properties for the first time and before any of the view or component children have been checked. It is invoked only once when the directive is instantiated. So during instantiation here, it's called once every time that the component is rendered. And what it does is essentially it returns component is initialized and we pass in a function. So what is that function? So the function is call me and it returns nothing. So that's what the void is for. It returns nothing. And what we do is we just console log a private method, and we are able to call this private method within this component, but not within other components. I hope that's understandable. Let me see if our application is over. So what that means is private classes are available within the scope of your application. So if you are in app component.ts, Your private classes are only available when you're within that um, application. And if you create another class, then you're unable to access. Okay, what's going on? I think my computer is having enough. Oh, it's Angular. So I'll be just waiting for Angular to finish rendering.
So our speaker is having a little bit of technical issues, but he's going to be back in a few minutes. So if you have any questions, feel free to like post them here and he'll get back to you. Yeah, you can also still ask questions about She Could Africa Nairobi. Yeah, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. I hope you also are like following along through after cloning the GitHub repository that he had posted. Just a minute. Yeah, so our speaker will be here in a few more minutes. In the meantime, I'd like to talk about Good African Nairobi. So, yes, we are a community that embodies technical growth, especially for women, and we strive to get more women into this field. And more of this is that we like to hold all these technical sessions so that we all become like technically equipped, not just through other various talks, through other skills. But if you'd like to join us and not to miss any information, you can join our Telegram group. I will be posting it here. We also have a Signal group that you'll get when after you've joined our Telegram group. And yes, this is actually the first meetup of this month that we have. That is the web development in Angular. Yes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them here, and the speaker will get back to you in a few moments. As we wait, I think the one of the most fascinating features I have encountered in Angular is actually like moving through different components without actually refreshing the page, which is impressive so far. And yeah, you can also tell me what features that you have seen that are actually like impressive in Angular so far through this meetup. And if you've had any challenges while cloning the repo and getting around it. So I just spoke to the speaker. He'll be here in about a minute or less. Yes, those who are joining us right now, our speaker has experienced a slight minor technical issue, but he'll be back in like a minute or less, actually less now. And he'll be joining us to continue with his presentation on web development using Angular. So if you have any questions so far, you can feel free to post them here. And also, if you don't have access to the repository, you can tell me so that I can paste it here, but it's already in the chat. And if you also want to join our Telegram group, it's already here. And also, you can follow our Twitter handle to not miss any updates and notifications from us. And what else? Yeah. Our speaker is back. Let me just add him. Yeah, Cyrus is back.
I'm sorry, my machine was not having it today. So yeah, here's our application. And I think time is not allowing us. No, this is the other one. We have another one. Oh, I opened the wrong one. This is our new block. Okay. How comes everything is sorted? We even have a no, nothing is sorted. Okay. So this is how you bring this is when you scaffold your application. When you create a
You haven't shared your screen yet.
oh
Yeah.
these things just keep forgetting. I want everything was so smooth. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so this is our application, and this is how it's going to look like after you generate it from the terminal. So this is just like the basic scaffold. And what I'm going to do first thing is create a folder, and I'm just going to call it _app because this is where our main application is going to be. And what that _app is going to contain is we're going to put in our app component, main app component, HTML, the CSS, and the TypeScript. No, that's not supposed to be there. And the app component TypeScript. Let's just wait for that to refresh. Okay, it's working. I don't think it's working. Oh yeah, now it's working. Still loading VS Code. Anyway, I'm sorry guys, I had so many applications running. So how would we bring this up? Let me bring in the terminal. And so ng serve. So we can just, there's nothing here. There's nothing here to serve. cd new, let me just see what's in there. cd new blog. And then we can just serve, we can serve that. And now we can serve this. Now, after creating this sort of application, we need to come back to our module and fix our imports. So in our main application module, here we can see we're importing the app component, but we're going to get an error because this is not where our application is. So after doing this, our app, then slash. So let's just do this _app. Yeah, I think that's sorted. Did I just delete? Looks like we deleted our application. No wonder haipatikani. Let's just create it. So app.component.ts, and I'm just gonna pull this from somewhere else. Just gonna take it from GitHub. I wonder how that happened. And now this is where our main application logic is going to be. I want to clone that code, but it wouldn't be of any use actually. Just a minute. Yeah, so this is how your ng on init function should look like. Let's just clear all this. And it seems like we haven't installed our ng modules, but I can see them here. Are we getting errors? Ah, yes. ng add. So let's just, this is similar to saying npm I. So let's just add all of our inputs, and let's just, okay, let's just use npm I. I think that's okay. We should have added a dot, but that's okay. Now, what are we going to do? So the constructor we already know is used for instantiating our objects. So what we can do is we can log so created our class, and on init we can say, actually let me just craft up the basic stuff before we can get to the neat stuff. And this is ng on init, and then we can call another function, call me. Nope, we don't have a call me function yet. So I like calling my functions after I have called my constructor functions. I think it's I've seen most guys do it. I don't know if it's convention. I followed it from the docs. So we can just have a private function called call me, and what it can do, it can just say, you can just log hello, and once we run our application, I think so we can solve that ng solve. I hope it worked out. Oh, okay. Looks like our application didn't install properly. It's okay. cd -2 We're just going to the new one that I had created. cd shcode. cd shcode demo. So this is a small demo I had prepared for the application. Looks like our application didn't install properly. My computer was getting like overloaded, so I had to restart, and it looks like that was what was causing all the issues. And so here in our application, I would say this one is crafted. Yeah, I wish I'd have wish we had more time. Well, like, can we have more time? Anyway.
How long do you need?
No, we will never finish anyway. Now, now this is the small application component that we had created. I'm just going to go through and finish on optimizing, as I was refreshing myself on what we needed to do with the application. So let me just solve this. ng. And so this is our main application logic. And what we do here is we move our application from the root application into another separate folder with an underscore, just to make sure we know that this is the main application logic and this is not the main app folder, whereby all the application logic per se is held. This is app underscore app is to show the entry point of the application. And here you can see what our She Code Africa. Oh, I think Nairobi is fine. And so we're not yet there. Okay, so what we do here is now you remember I said that your application component is accessible from everywhere. So here we can see app.navigation. And what is this? That's gonna take forever. Anyway, here is the app navigation. And you can see here we have the component decorator. And the component decorator has 3 parameters, I would say, passed. So the selector, so this is what identifies the component. Let's see what it says. So the CSS selector that identifies this directive in a template and triggers instantiation of the directive. So whenever you call app.navigation, you're instantiating this component class. And when you use template URL, you're telling the application TypeScript file that the URL for the HTML file that you want is here, and the styles for that application are here. So typically this is like the brain or the brain cell for your specific component. And in our main application component, we see that we also call app home. So we are sort of doing partials here. If you can check our application navigation component in the navigation HTML file, you can see we only have plain HTML. Actually, nothing is happening. And if you check our TypeScript, almost nothing is happening. We only instantiate the class and we implement on init, call the constructor function, pass nothing, ng on init, pass nothing, and move on. Now our application also uses the home folder. What is the home? So let's just start with the brain. Now here we can see that our selector exports app.home. So this is how this component is accessible anywhere in the application. And what we do, we're just exporting basically nothing. We just want it instantiated because we are not doing any sort of logic behind our home. This is our home application. And although I hope you do remember, our home application is where we have our button that calls the API. I hope our server is up and running. Yeah, thank God we have errors. Yeah, I was trying to see how okay, we have so many errors. All these errors. Oh, yeah, I remember. Okay. Anyway, just a minute. So here is our application. Here is home. Here is navigation. Now, what else is needed in our application? When we go to the logic, this is the main logic behind the application, the parameters and all that. Now, this is a blog application. I think when we open the page, it's not working by default because we have all these cool errors that TypeScript always knows how to show us because it's TypeScript strongly typed. Anyway, let's go back. So there's something wrong with, okay. There's something wrong with our subject component. And now, what is the structure of our application? Now, our application has, let me just create a new file. Now, our application has the home component, and the home component has the navigation. And the navigation has each component, each blog component and route and respective services injected. Full stop. And we also have our application. Now our application has a home, the navigation, whereby each page is taken, and we have the, what's it called? Where each blog post or each blog component is rendered. What is a blog component? Now, when we come into our blog components, now here we have AI. This is a technical blog per se. And if we have AI component, what do we have in AI? So AI is just a simple HTML component that takes in the app component, the AI component on init, and renders this blog data. So this block data, you can see, has some errors here, is because our application needs to pass through the subject component in order for the data to be rendered for each cybersecurity form. Let me just correct that error so that I can explain to you guys what is going on in detail. So our subject component here, as you can see, the TypeScript file is doing nothing, honestly, by now. And what the application is supposed to do is it's supposed to take input data. So we need to have an input decorator here. And the input decorator is supposed to take data. And what is data? Data is what needs to be it's not called data, it's called block data. Data is what is exported by each component here. This data here. Now, if we add this, if we add this input, now we want the input of our subject component to be the block data from each component. I wish I had time to bring this application from scratch. Nope, something is wrong. In our AI component, let's just go and see how this is happening.
So we have like 15 minutes max.
15 minutes, okay. I think 15 minutes I'm able to correct this error.
Yes, and then there's also a question from Masha. He's asking, he wants to know how Angular handles memory and DOM updates.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if I should answer that first. So let me just look for the presentation that I had. Angular uses two-way data binding. So when I say two-way data binding, there's event binding and property binding. And I just want to show you that in a bit. I don't know if I'll have to go now to the main application that I had created. However, let me just go back to the main application we had created. I want to be able to show you from code how you can be able to see this in action, because the presentations that I had really just give like a high level overview of what is entailed, but they didn't really explain how it's supposed to be handled in code. So CD she code Africa, and then Bonga proposal, and then let's just open code, and then let's serve this. Okay. Let's serve this. How we handle two-way and DOM updates in the okay, what happened here? Let me bring this back. Okay, that's okay. Yeah. Now, in our subject application, or should we use the subject or the pipe? Anyway, in our application here, here in the main application component, no, it's supposed to be in the subject component. Here inside the subject component, we have the application that takes in types. So if you remember the previous diagram we have our main application template, and we have our logic and our styles and all that nonsense. And now when we have our logic here and our HTML here, for example, here we have a magnify. Let me show you what the magnify function does. We can go to definition. Yeah, no definition found. It didn't find it. I thought it would be smart enough. Anyway, so here, let me fix this. It wasn't supposed to be there. So this is a simple directive. So what the directive does is it takes data from the rendered HTML template, or as it's rendering, it takes data from the template and then brings it back and then into the directive. And then when a user presses click, now it does these functions before anything else, whereby it gets the computed style and the font size, and it converts it into a string so that it can remove the last two characters, and then we make it now a number. And then here in Magnify, we check the font size array and add it. Okay, this is just way too much. Allow me to correct this for a minute. And after correcting the, after adding the, okay, this was way too much considering the font size that I'm using, or anyway, it takes the, let me see if this is done. Yep, it's done. Thank you. So what it does is it takes the data, and let me show you this in action. Now this is a blog. What it does is, as you can see, you are unable to select. Oh, we never implemented this feature. Yeah. So you see, when you click on the function, it zooms out, zooms in, and then zooms out. And then now you have to start again. And this was an error I did with the first application, but I'm going to solve it in the next commit. So when you're going to be pulling this in your code, you're going to see it. So you're able to zoom out, zoom in, and find the most stable font size for you. This was a problem that I was having, but I fixed this code in the new. Yeah. So after the template is before rendered, data is taken back to the component. Now, if the component if the template has a directive, data first of all goes to the directive and then it is rendered. And if a user has a click, or if there is a property event, for example, in the form we have here. So let's just pull up and inspect. So you can see the page is not refreshing, but if we do have Cyrus at B and we have 1, 2, 3, and when we register, we can see that our form is not refreshing. I don't know what's the problem here. Maybe there's a problem with type assigning. The page doesn't load again. So Angular is intelligent enough to know which component needs to re-render again. So for example, now in our code here, you're able to see we have a form component on its own. And what the form component does is it has a public user data variable, and it has a function. And the job of the function is just to return the user email. That's all. That's all the function does. It doesn't even do anything else. And this is the banana bot that we were talking about. And I don't know why the email is not rendering here. Input type name. Okay. Anyway, by the time you'll be seeing this, I'll have fixed the code on GitHub, by possibly today or tomorrow. Now, we also have another component that is a pipe. I was going to say pipe. Now, we have already discussed what the pipe does, or we have discussed what the magnify directive does. Now, here we have a pipe. And what the pipe does is, here in our object, we have, when we are instantiating our, let's say, our mixed reality object. So we have data here, and data is accessible from anywhere because this component app mixed reality is accessible by any component within the application. So by default, also the data here is accessible. And in form, well, no, not from component, in the pipe now I want to show you also how data works. Whenever you click on an application, or whenever data is brought from the application, you have something here called, you can see here's the pipe. So here's how we pass our pipe. Our pipe, what it does is it takes in the array, sorts it, and displays the array. So for example, if we have related links and we want our user to view them in alphabetical order, we just pass here the either ascending or descending. And this is not inbuilt, so you've already seen we customize this. But when you pass the alphabetized pipe on its own, it will tell you that it needs, we made that optional. Yeah. Here when we put this question mark, we made this order optional, but I think it shouldn't be optional because we need to know whether we are ordering them in ascending or descending. And now I think we're going to generate an error here, because this alphabetized needs to take in an argument. And when we say ascending, Yeah, you see, there is the error. When we say ascending and hit save, there should be no error now. Yeah, anyway, let's go back. Terminal. My good friend terminal. There we go. Let's do that. Ascending. And so if we check our application now, I think it's just loaded by errors. Thank God. Okay, let's just wait for it to load. Essentially what it does is, for every data that is passed through in the array, it's supposed to alphabetize it. Now, what this is doing is it's similar to an OR gate. It's just passing the alphabetize function. And what the alphabetize does is just similar to how you would pass middleware in Node.js. It's just a class that will implement the pipe transform. Pipe transform is an interface that transforms pipes. And what the transform does is it takes an array of type string and returns the order, and it's supposed to return a string array. So an array of type string. And this is what we do. So we declare variable sorted be equal to array.sort. And if the order is in descending, reverse the array, and then we return sorted. So if the order is ascending, then hence that backwards logic. So where is it? There's even some other functions we were doing here, such as where is it? Awesomify. No, the magnify directive. So here we were trying to. So have you ever gone to a page and you are unable to copy, for example, the blog posts? So how you can do that is in our, should I say, was it the magnify directive? Inside our magnify directive, you should be able to pass this argument here. And what this does is it takes the element reference, which we call element here. Element. And what this does is it takes the element reference, the native element, the style of the element, and the user select now the cursor, and it puts it to none. You are unable now to select any text within the paragraph, and you are able to zoom in to sort of depict now what is being shown now. I hope this rendered.
Hi, Sarah. So
Yeah, time is up.
Yes.
Okay. I can
but
click
unless
in.
I also have like a few suggestions. So since this repository is already public, so do you like need help to refine it to make it better? Do you want it to be open source where some of our members who are present in this meeting can contribute to it? Or how would you like us to move forward with this project?
Yeah, I'm going to post the final error handling technique that I had in mind before the meeting. But other than that, you can be able to create a pull request and you can just work on the project on your own. It's free it's open source. Actually, I don't have any ties with the project. Yeah, you can just be able to feel free to customize it and even take it and use it in your own personal project. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So here we can be able to see we are unable to select the text in our blog post, and yeah, that's how we do it in Angular. I wish we had more time.
Hopefully when they're voting, if they want you to like come back to another session,
I hope they do.
So do you have any last remarks to tell people?
Well, I would say maybe first of all, if you're a student, join the Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador Program. It stops. And if you are a developer, I would say start slow and do what we don't do, read the documentation. So nowadays, people know, or developers know, that documentation is #1 source. Instead of depending on Stack Overflow, first of all, just know what the language needs, then move now to the application development. That's what I would suggest. And I think with that, thank you. I hope I get an invite next time.
Okay. So thank you to all the members who have managed to attend this session, and those ones who also didn't manage. I hope you get to find this recording. And yes, thank you, Sarah, for being our speaker today. We hope to also see you in another session. Hopefully, if the members vote in your favor, we will see you soon. So thank you so much for this session. So have a good night, guys.